The situation in the Middle East is reaching a boiling point. After Iran reimposed the blockade of the Hormuz Strait, the US tightened its own blockade of Iranian ports. It got to the point where the US fired on and even seized an Iranian tanker that tried to break through the US blockade. US President Donald Trump immediately boasted that American forces had seized a cargo ship under the Iranian flag after it tried to bypass the US naval blockade in the Gulf of Oman. And right after that, a new escalation of tensions happened between the US and China as well. China supported Iran and stated that the US was acting like pirates, and the US unexpectedly launched large-scale military exercises off the coast of China. And all of this is happening for a reason, because it turned out that the seized tanker, which was sailing under the Iranian flag, was carrying Chinese cargo, and the tanker was actually going from a Chinese port to Iran. And the cargo on the ship was not ordinary. The tanker left a port where chemicals necessary for missile production are loaded. I'm Alexei Pechi, let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave any comment under this episode, and also subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechi News, the link is below. In the description of this video, you'll also find links on how you can support the work of this YouTube channel. I will be grateful for any of your donations or sponsorships. Bye.
Motor Vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
So, US President Donald Trump stated that American forces have seized a cargo ship flying the Iranian flag after it tried to bypass the US naval blockade in the Gulf of Oman. Well, and the US Central Command showed footage of how this happened. Today, this is the first seizure of a vessel and the first case of a ship being fired upon since the US blockade came into effect last Sunday in response to Iran's de facto control of the Strait of Hormuz since the start of the war on February 28. Trump stated that US Marines disabled and seized a vessel called Tosca, while American and Iranian officials were preparing for talks in Pakistan ahead of the upcoming ceasefire deadline, which will take effect on the evening of April 21. Trump wrote on the social network Truth Social that a US Navy destroyer, quote, warned them in advance to stop. The Iranian crew refused to comply, so our naval ship stopped them on the spot by punching a hole in the engine room. According to a statement from US Central Command published on Sunday evening, the destroyer Spruance fired several shots from its 5-inch Mk-45 gun at the engine room of the Tusky. According to state media, the Iranian military accused the US of violating the ceasefire agreement and of maritime piracy and promised to respond soon. But here the Iranians forget that just a day earlier, they themselves fired on a tanker that was trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, even though they had previously stated that the strait was open. Before this attack, Trump threatened that if Iran did not agree to a deal, the United States would disable all power plants and all bridges in Iran. And, as Trump stated, no more good guys. And right after that, oil prices rose by about 7% on Sunday evening. The jump after the opening of international markets offsets a significant part of the sharp drop on Friday when President Trump and Iran's foreign minister announced the opening of the Hormuz Strait for tanker traffic. And the longer the restriction on oil transportation remains in effect, the longer oil prices will stay high. Here, Americans are already preparing for the worst. This segment of the episode is interesting. Energy Minister Chris Wright stated that average gasoline prices in the US may not return to the pre-war level of below $3 per gallon until next year. In short, he's saying directly that you shouldn't expect gasoline prices to drop this year. Nevertheless, Wright assures that Donald Trump handled the situation perfectly, and the rise in gasoline prices is not a consequence of the war. Absolutely not. Some kind of inflation is to blame for everything. However, for some reason he doesn't explain what caused it, this very inflation. But I think that for a certain part of the electorate, such an explanation will do just fine. Next is a quote from Chris Wright. Prices have probably peaked and they will start to go down. Certainly after this conflict is resolved, you will see prices decrease. Captain Obvious. Although a price under $3 is still quite a large amount considering inflation, but the Trump administration successfully handled this unprecedented crisis. Chris Wright doesn't explain exactly how, and just in case anyone thinks that Trump raised oil prices with his war and therefore gas prices inside America, Wright recalled the beginning of Russia's war against Ukraine in 2022. And he said, look, back in 2022, Joe Biden handled it even worse. Why are you so worried about gas prices? The situation now isn't that bad. Wright said that Americans shouldn't complain, since this year's peak is still about $1 lower than the 2022 peak when Joe Biden was president. But let's get back to geopolitics. Today, China expressed concern about the US's forcible detention of a cargo ship flying the Iranian flag. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun stated, quote, "The situation in the Hormuz Strait is delicate and complicated. The parties involved in the conflict should avoid further escalation and create the necessary conditions for restoring normal transit through the strait. Beijing urges the parties to the conflict to continue maintaining the momentum of the ceasefire and negotiations. Now that a window for peace has opened, favorable conditions should be created to end the war as soon as possible." But the Chinese are upset about this incident for good reason. Specifically, it's about the detention of that very Iranian vessel. It turned out that the vessel was called Tusko. The vessel, which is capable of carrying up to 5,000 containers, was returning from a Chinese port where chemicals are stored. The Gaulan port is located in the city of Zhuhai on the southeastern coast of China. It is a well-known port for loading chemicals, particularly sodium perchlorate. And sodium perchlorate is a key precursor for solid rocket fuel, which Iran needs for its missile program. At the same time, it is still not exactly known what materials were on board this vessel, and here we are waiting to hear what the Americans will say. But it's obvious that from this port, well, aside from chemicals, practically nothing else is ever transported. At the same time, the US began its largest defense exercises with the Philippines, which highlights the importance for Washington of a military presence in the Indo-Pacific region to counter China against the backdrop of the war in the Middle East. Balikatan will also attract a record number of military personnel, with the participating countries sending more than 17,000 troops for naval military exercises and live fire drills. Among the participants are the US, of course, as well as Japan, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and France, and of course the Philippines. The start of the annual US-Philippines military exercises took place a day after China sent a group of warships to conduct drills in the western part of the Pacific Ocean, and Japan joined the Balikatan exercises for the first time. And all this is happening against the backdrop of yet another round of preparations for Donald Trump's visit to Beijing already in mid-May. Why another one? Because the previous 2 times his visit was postponed and cancelled. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid channel membership. How can you do that? All the links and details are in the description of this video, where it says support the Alexi Peachy channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you, and I'll be grateful for any support you give. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.